direct your question to the mayoral candidates or the Ward 1 council candidates or the Ward 2 council candidates, and that'll be part of your 30 seconds directing the question. And if the other candidates in that group would like to respond as well, they have that option. They can do that once the person you asked is finished. Okay? So that's how it's going to run. I'd just like to introduce and thank all the candidates who've come this evening. Starting on the far right, Anthony Jenkins, Miles Bowman, Todd Attridge, Les Andrews, Peter Angelo is not here this evening, Laurie Carr, Will Lambert, Sam Whitaker, John Bickle, Wendy Meadows, Brian Coggins, Bob Sanderson, Terry Hickey, Ian Everdell, Colleen Haley is not here this evening, Ken Morden is not here, Vicky Mink, and Jeff Lees was unable to be with us this evening. But just before I bring David up to make his remarks, I would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that the All Candidates meeting is located on the Treaty 20 Michi-Sagaig territory and in the traditional territory of the Michi-Sagaig and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaty First Nations, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. David?
Thank you, Patricia. Good evening, welcome to everyone. It's nice to see a good crowd of folks out here tonight. I think we're all here tonight because we know a secret, and that secret is this. Port Hope is a beautiful, unique, vibrant place full of passionate, creative, and caring people. And we're here because we know that it can continue to be all of those things and possibly even more. At different times over more than 3 decades, I've lived and worked, raised children, owned a business, and played in Port Hope. And I really think that part of this community's strength has been its socioeconomic diversity and the dynamic tension that holds it all together. Unfortunately, that healthy diversity is at risk because some of our citizens are being left behind and excluded. My work and experience in this community have shown me that a growing number of our neighbors aren't experiencing the same growing prosperity that others enjoy. And the challenge of simply keeping a roof over your head is a losing battle. I joined the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee about 10 years ago, and at that time I was part of a small band of concerned citizens who couldn't ignore a situation in Port Hope, where a large group of their neighbors were living in squalor with no way out. The people I found at that affordable housing table were from a collection of community organizations, and they were motivated in the same way that we were by the indignity of systems that leave our neighbors unsheltered. They believe that housing is a human issue, not just a business or planning issue, and that everyone, regardless of their circumstances or station in life, deserves a roof over their head. A decade later, we've seen a few wins on the housing front, but the need for housing that is affordable along the whole spectrum of income is greater than ever. People who have lived their whole lives in Port Hope are no longer able to afford to live here. It might surprise you to hear that Greenwood Coalition doesn't want to work on housing issues. We would much rather be helping people to improve their health and well-being, to find healing from the trauma they've experienced, and to build a community of inclusion. But we find that work hampered by the current housing crisis. It's almost impossible to make healthier choices when you don't have safe, secure housing. And tonight, we would urge the municipal mayors and councillors to do 3 things when elected. First, to show moral leadership on this issue and make housing for everyone a priority. Secondly, we are calling on those who would be elected to take direct action to increase the supply of affordable rental housing. And finally, we recognize the need for municipal social planning portfolios or task forces that will provide a framework for doing this work. The Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee believes that we benefit as a whole community when no one is left behind and when no one is left out in the cold. And we have taken the initiative to organize tonight's meeting and to participate in this current election process because we believe that a healthy, vibrant community built upon the principle of inclusion is necessary and that it's possible here in Port Hope. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to what unfolds.
Just before the candidates begin speaking, I would like to review the questions for the audience. So there were 3 questions. Number 1A, what is your understanding of the housing crisis in Northumberland? 1B, how would you use your position on Port Hope Council to address the needs? And secondly, what creative solutions would you propose to address the problem? So that is what we're about to hear now. So I'm going to ask you to begin, Anthony, please.
Thank you. My understanding of the housing crisis in Northumberland is it's like it is in many other places, exacerbated perhaps by the demographics and the economics particular to this area. By demographics, I mean we have an aging population. And with aging, I know, comes a decrease in earning power and opportunity. The economics that are changing are the decrease in good manufacturing jobs, blue-collar jobs especially, and that also limits income in those years even before retirement age. And the other economic factor is the influx of affluent people from west of here who, while they buy at the upper end, it puts pressure throughout the entire structure, the entire price structure of the housing market. These things combined are making a situation that's now critical and projected to get worse. And to get a little bit more political, another factor that relates to the economics is the decline in social assistance, largely a provincial affair. We have yet to recover from the Mike Harris years. If I was a member of council, I would be, and I have to speak only in very general terms, a sympathetic champion of this direct priority action that was mentioned earlier. This has to be an issue that concerns all of us. And in terms of your creative solution, well, I wouldn't dare to tell you other than to make one suggestion. In the next provincial election, vote for a change of government. Was that a red card?
Miles?
Hi, everyone. Getting the mic going. There we go. Okay. So what do I know about the housing crisis? I think that indeed it is a crisis as far as we should be concerned. It's one of the things that's holding Port Hope back from its potential. When you look at what a healthy economy has for a regular vacancy rate, it's listed as about 3%. Port Hope is coming in around 0.3%. Just today there was a report released on Facebook, some of you may have seen it, talking about the lack of housing in this county. What I want to share with you is that there's no basically new development for affordable housing coming in, and we should really be alarmed because what we do have is actually being sold off and redeveloped. So we're actively losing the potential for rentable spaces, places where people can purchase and work in our communities. That has a major impact on the potential for our economic development. How do we bring in young people to work? How do we bring in families to live? The houses that are here, Tony alluded to, are expensive and they are grossly out of reach for the people that we want coming here to build up our tax base and to work in our community for a lifetime. something needs to be done about that. What do I do as a counselor? I don't solve everything because I'm not the professional, but man, are there a lot of talented people at our disposal in this community. And so I would want to listen to them, work especially with affected groups by consulting with them. One of the things that I do at the university that I work at is town halls and community consultation. And so I would want to be working with those groups so they can tell us what it is that they need. Finally, in terms of creative solutions, I mentioned that I'm from a university. I want to be partnering with educational institutions to start bringing in research programs that can offer creative solutions for things like housing crises, and how can we use that to basically fast track some of the things that we need happening in our local economy.
Thank you, Miles. Todd?
Thanks very much. My understanding of the housing crisis is this is probably one of those keystone moments, right, where we actually need to be able to tackle this first and foremost. If we were to look at all the issues that we've got going on in the municipality and the county, and we looked at these as dominoes, the first one that needs to drop is housing, because it's going to be a gateway to solving a whole lot of other things. We're in a cycle right now where, because we've got high demand and we've got low supply, rents just are going to keep going up and up and up. We've got to be able to make sure that we have some sort of supply chain to be able to take care of this. And the affordable housing issue, because it becomes a gateway to all sorts of things, namely getting people out of poverty, and we need to be able to do that. It also happens to be one of the gateways to a workforce. And as we start building in the industrial areas, we're going to need to make sure that we have people who can actually fill those jobs. What would I do in council? I agree with Miles. One of the things I think we need to keep focused on as council is we're not the experts. The moment we come to the table thinking we have all the answers, we stop asking questions. And we need to be able to go to the experts and draw on those expertises. Part of that is, working with private and nonprofit organizations, for-purpose organizations, and be able to work with them so that we can solve this. We also need to be able to pave the way for multi-unit homes, restoring spaces, and looking at other creative solutions. Tiny homes, redevelopment of open spaces, making way for basement apartments, and zoning so that we can put smaller homes on them, or homes that can be actually separate so that we can put more than one dwelling inside of them.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you. The housing problem is a quantity problem. We don't have enough housing. We have 4 segments that we're affecting. The young that can't afford to get in, the old that can't afford to get out or maintain, the long-term care situation, that's a problem, and the homeless situation. Now, as a councillor, I can lobby the various levels of government, including municipal government. And we have to start getting the feds, the province, the county, stop studying this stupid problem. It's been around for years. We know there's a problem. Take the money that you're using to study and spend on consultants. Give us the money. I would take that money, I would cut a deal with the developers and say, okay, you want to build in this town? You give us X a number of houses for every house you build. You sell it to us at your cost. And I'm going to move a family into that house, and they're going to pay me $1,200 a month to own that house. And then I'm going to take that $1,200 and I'm going to subsidize 2 or 3 other families on their rent. And that's how we get the ball rolling on that. And the second thing I would do is Ward Street. There's a vacant lot up there. A house was just torn down. It's probably 75 by 300 feet deep. Let's change our zoning so that we can twist the house that faces east, and we'll put 3 semis or 3 townhouses in there, lower the per cost per house on a land basis, and move some people in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Les. Laurie?
Well, I believe it truly is a crisis. There are almost 11,000 low-income households in Northumberland. And according to Stats Can numbers, that's about 30% of our community. The average house price in Northumberland is $447,000, and single unit rent is approximately $1,019. Low-income earners can absolutely not afford these house or rent prices. We also have an older age profile in Northumberland than the rest of Ontario. 30% are over 60. Many live on fixed incomes, and in Port Hope, wait times can be 2 to 7 years for social housing. We need to drive public awareness to the issue by having the NAHC regularly on the council agenda, perhaps inviting a quarterly report. Bylaws need to be understood and potentially revised or relaxed. It may be time also to change our planning acts to include affordable housing with every development approved in the county. Perhaps a certain percentage of the development should be put towards affordable housing. Vacant buildings should be looked at with an eye towards raising the roof reside initiatives. And most importantly, a change of mindset. Our communities offer luxury housing, but housing is not a luxury.
Thank you, Lori. Will?
Okay, I'm going to be really short because I agree with most of what's already been said. My understanding of the housing crisis is the same as yours. We all recognize that we have one. There is very little or no affordable housing in Port Hope. You see the ads in the newspaper or on Facebook, or you talk to friends that everybody knows somebody who's looking for an affordable apartment. And if you're a low to moderate income family, chances are you're not going to find it in Port Hope. So we have a serious problem. What would I do? I agree with what's been said earlier. We don't need to reinvent the wheel on council. We need to work with the organizations that are already out there with boots on the ground, that know the problems and know the solutions. They can tell us. We have to be actively listening to those people and working with them and supporting what they think are the measures that will be effective. That's really all I have to say on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Sam?
It is a problem, and it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse if we don't do something about it. And one of the things that it impacts, as far as I am concerned, is not only that roof over your head and the key that you have in your hand that you can open up the door, but if we don't address it, it also affects mothers, children, schooling. It's housing, but it also affects the whole populace, and it's something we cannot hide from. And I think I'll look at you honestly, and it's probably something that I've hidden from. When I was invited to this, I thought, holy smokes, what do I know about this? And I read and read and read and read, and I would look at you, Patricia, and I would look at you all and say, we've got to get serious, and we've got to gather not only the agencies, but I think there are other ladies and gentlemen here who have said that maybe we ought to get business involved in this too, contractors involved in this too. We have to address it, because if we don't do it today, it is going to hit us in the back of the head tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. John?
Social housing is not just a problem in Port Hope or Northumberland County. It's across the country from one side to the other. Our federal and provincial governments are finally starting to realize that they are starting to look at it as being a major problem, something that has to be looked at seriously. The housing issues have been left too long and not been looked at. We in Port Hope possibly have the opportunity. We have several schools that have been closed in recent years. Why can't we lobby the provincial government, the school boards, to turn the schools over to the communities who originally paid for the schools to start with? Take them, make them into some kind of affordable housing for single dwellers or families, depending on the size of the property, there are ways that we could probably get involved. We need to put more effort into helping Habitat for Humanity, which does a tremendous job at supplying homes for low-income families, getting them on their feet, getting them moving. We need to look at that, at how we can help them, how we can produce more land for them to work on. Other than that, you've pretty well heard everybody say basically the same thing, so I will pass the mic on.
Thank you, John. Wendy?
Hello. Hello. My understanding of the housing crisis in Northumberland has, I've had an understanding for a while, but I didn't realize how little I knew until we were invited here and I began reading about it. And honestly, I was very surprised about so many things. But it begins with the very low availability of rental accommodations, as we've said, and as Port is less than 0.3%. I was, for lack of a better word, gobsmacked. And of course, with that comes high rents. I think the average right now is $1,019, they said today. The average income can't afford the average house price. New and existing housing developments lack the inclusion of integrated housing in their builds. How I would address this on council, I agree with Laurie about changing the Planning Act. I think we need to include integrated housing, allow seniors, youths, families, subsidized rentals all to be housed within perhaps the same building or complex, streamline and fast-track affordable housing applications, still keeping within the laws, but I think they can be probably put through a little quicker, perhaps with tax incentives, and definitely to learn from the experts, to listen to what's happening. We've got a lot in this town, and working together and having them address the council of how we can help, then we would certainly know more. Creative solutions. I was thinking about looking at zoning and development bylaws in regards to construction of accessory units, such as maybe basement or garden or carriage suites, things that would make better use of the existing residences and space that we have already. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Brian?
Well, I think everybody has made the statement that this is a very critical issue, not just here, but within Canada, and actually, probably, in my travels around the world, it's a universal problem there as well. So it's not something that we can solve overnight. Why have we got the problem? High rents, lack of employment, and we have a new little twist in here, and that is the seniors who are finding it more and more difficult to pay for their utilities and to just maintain a lifestyle in the homes that they already own. On council, you have to deal with the issues that come before you, and this is one issue that we have to deal with. And that can be done in many different ways. I like John's suggestion of using the empty public buildings that we have, and let's convert them, and we have plenty of them. Again, we have to be very careful. Council doesn't have a lot of say, but we certainly, and I emphasize that, certainly, we can be a conduit to get the information out to the required services, both locally and provincially and federally, to help deal with this issue.
Thank you, Brian. Paul?
Thank you. And David, thank you for your comments. We do have a wonderful community, and I think we're intent to keep it that way. I think everybody has agreed that we do have a housing crisis, if you want to call it that, and the figures were correct. 3% is considered average. We're well under 0.5%, which means we don't have it. I'll give you a couple of the comments. This isn't just a rural or an urban issue. This is both. The solutions may well be different. We need to also incorporate and remember that we talk about accessible housing as well. When it comes to what are we doing and how can we do it, first off, as mayor, it's easier for me because I just have to talk all these councillors into supporting it as a high priority, and I think you just did that for me. So we're good there. And then it's what do we actually do? The federal government does have a housing strategy, and we need to work with that. The province has the same thing, and the county, Northumberland County, is doing the same thing. I was at a workshop as late as yesterday looking at these sort of issues. What we will do as council is raise the priority of the housing crisis. It's affordability. It's not going to be an easy solution, but if we work together, always we can achieve it. We need to increase the priority that we have it, and the first thing I would do, without question, is get public engagement. We need to make sure that everybody is there. We have tools in our toolbox: community improvement plan, zoning bylaws. They're not official planning, and so we have all the tools. We just have to get them out of the toolbox, start using them. And if council works together, puts it as a priority, we can make headway. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Terry?
Good. Thank you. I'm not going to go over any statistics because you've probably been statistic out right by now. But what I will say is that every locality has a different set of problems. There are commonalities, but every locality is different. So Port Hope is going to be different from Cobra, going to be different from Brighton. And I think we have to take a look at addressing the specific needs of this community as compared to any other. We can use some factors that will work elsewhere, but we have to look right here at home. And the other important thing is the community has to be on board. I mean, look around you tonight. There are a fair number of people here, but we also have 16,000, almost 17,000 people in this community. Yeah, I think it's council's job to make sure that if the municipality is going to step up and do something, that the municipality gets out in front of the entire public and gets them to be on board. Because at the end of the day, if money is going to be allocated to help fund this, the community has to be involved. They will have to have a say. I realize that we have problems for all age groups. Homelessness is a multifaceted issue, and we have to take a look at everything. I know that I've seen a number of seniors who are looking where, after they sell their home, or where do they go? There's just not enough rental units. We're shy by hundreds of units. David, I like what you said earlier when you were talking about moral leadership. I think that's extremely important in the community. And as you may know, each councillor has a portfolio. I have worked in engineering, for example, in the last 4 years. I think the mayor needs a portfolio too. And that portfolio is under council's consideration and the community to select 2 or 3 particularly strong objectives and goals. This is one of them. And you need a champion. If you don't have a champion, this will not happen. This can't happen. And Les, I'm going to put a nod to you because I like the idea of thinking outside of the box. That's absolutely what you have to do because right now, the box is collapsing.
Thank you, Terry.
So you've heard lots of numbers and stuff. There are a couple of things that I think bear reiterating. One is, with the sale of all of the lots in our business park, there's suddenly going to be a whole bunch of industry coming to town. We have nowhere for people who are going to work there to live. We have nowhere for people who are going to work in our new hotel to live. We have nowhere for people who are going to work in our restaurants or our other service businesses to live because they can't afford any of the housing that we have currently. Those are all jobs that we need to help increase our tax base to help us get these other things or to pay for more affordable housing. But if we don't have any to begin with, then we have a problem. We are not the experts. Council is not the experts, but we can be facilitators, and I think that's really important to emphasize that we can work with all of these great organizations that we have in town, like Greenwood, like Habitat for Humanity, and get them what they need. I know Greenwood has some interesting plans in the works to try and get some affordable housing. I would love to see us give more land to Habitat to build more housing. Bob mentioned the community improvement plan. There's money in there, more money than you would get for a normal upstairs apartment downtown. If you redevelop your upstairs apartments as affordable units, you get more money to help do that. The town should be out there promoting that money, saying, we have this money, please take it from us, because we need these people to live here. And a couple of people have also mentioned our empty old public buildings and stuff. I think that's a great opportunity for us to look at, again, facilitating finding the right developer to come in and turn those into affordable units with, you know, the municipality's guidance. Finally, it's been mentioned a couple of times, looking at zoning and bylaws to allow more accessory units, to maybe be a leader in sort of this tiny house movement and see how, as we become one of the greenest communities in Canada, with the PHI cleanup, how we can also be one of the most affordable.
Thank you. Vicki?
So like everybody has discussed, there's a housing problem here in Northumberland as well as provincially. It's not a problem only for those with limited income, but for people who are leaving the community because they just cannot afford to live here. For Ward 2 particularly, decades ago, there were provincial, federal, and provincial bylaws that have prohibited multi-dwellings on farm properties or multi-units in these dwellings. I feel it's time to challenge some of those bylaws. Expecting seniors who have lived on their farms, potentially for their entire life, to leave their homes and potentially even leave the community because they cannot have somebody nearby to look after them as they age is a problem. And that's something that we should be challenging both rural as well as urban. Terry mentioned a few minutes ago about thinking outside the box. So one creative expertise that I have is I work in the architectural field. So I have a lot of experience in looking at sustainability in buildings. So when we're building affordable housing, we should be looking at sustainability within those houses themselves. Looking at green roof systems, gray water systems, using windows and sunshades to use the weather to naturally heat and cool. This will take pressure off the infrastructure. It will lower hydro bills, water bills, electricity bills if that unit itself can sustain itself. So rather than spending money endlessly, we need to be able to contain it within those units so the people living in those units can afford to live there.
Thank you, Vicki. Now we'll open up to questions from the audience. So I'll just remind you, you have 30 seconds to pose your question. When you see the red flag, that's it. So I think you probably want to think about who you're going to direct the question to first, then try to get your question in there in the time remaining available to you. After the candidate or candidates have responded, I'm going to ask you, was your question answered? So I'd like you to be honest and give us a yes or no reply to that question. Okay? So please come to the mic and give us a question and direct it to mayoralty candidates or Ward 1 or Ward 2 council candidates. Hello, we have Ed White starting things off.
I go into a lot of houses every day. They're huge. When I go down into a basement, you can have a whole other house in the basement of these houses. Why are we not having our builders build smaller houses, maybe more of them, and something that's more affordable?
Who are you asking?
Okay, I'll ask the mayor. Okay, why can't we, instead of always being the ones that are asking and asking and asking, why can't we just say to these builders, look, this is what we want. We want apartment.
Thanks, Ed. In fact, we can. You know, we just haven't. You know, to date, what we're dealing with is bylaws. You know, across the board. The nice thing is that council actually manages the bylaws. We do have to live within provincial regulations. And the other, you know, concern that the community will always have is safety. Right? So it has to be done within code. We do have a lot of property, certainly in the urban area, that is vacant. Right? And my comment about the community improvement plan means that we could take it and have a look at altering it. So the answer to your question is, of course we can. These are all potential solutions, but they need to come before council. They need to then go through the process and be incorporated. We can't tell, you know, people they should spend money when they don't want to, but we can certainly make it to their advantage.
Was your question answered?
Yes, but
Okay, thank you. Next, Peter. So to whom do you address your question?
I think I'll address it to both Les and Mayor Bob, if that's possible. We have a housing crisis, which has been defined by different stats, but there's some immediate housing crisis needs. In 2015, we had a huge power outage. People were without shelter. It was through the work of Greenwood Coalition to engage the municipality to actually put in a warming center. And this year, Farmers Almanac says you got minus 45 degrees throughout January. What are we going to do for the people who are living on the beach at this time?
Thank you. So, Les?
Is this on?
No. Try it again.
No? Okay. Well, that's a good question, because we really aren't set up to handle that problem. Yes, we do have the Parks and Recreation. Potentially we have Lakeland Place. I don't know what shape that's in. We're talking quite a few people with not a whole lot of places we could put them. I'd be kidding you if you thought we had a plan. We don't have a good plan. I know it's probably not the answer you want, but it's probably the truth.
Thank you, Les. Bob?
I think this is an issue that's Brian brought up a couple of times, and there's two. One, which is the homeless situation. It's been denied that we had one for a long time. We actually do have one, and the way to help those people is through consultation, getting in contact with them, and bringing them into a social network. First up, to make sure that they are fed and that they have someplace warm to go to. That is a community responsibility. We do have municipal buildings. The police are fairly active on it, but in fact, we don't have that sort of a strategy in place to say, here's what we need to do with it. So, along Les's line, we don't have a plan in place, but we do have some strategy, particularly to make sure that the municipal forces we have, particularly the police, provide for them when needed. And that's the crisis thing. Where we need to focus is when it's just not a crisis on the day-to-day activities.
Thank you, Bob. Terry would like to jump in.
Thank you. What I'm going to go back to is I think your point's well taken. We need a plan, and that plan is going to have many elements to it. So, in terms of involving the Davis Group, in terms of involving the county, in terms of involving the municipality, we need to be able to have plans in case of, for example, the recent fire on Wellington. So what are we going to do? What can we jump to right away? So again, it's a case of it's not simply, I wouldn't say simply, but it is a case of creating a master plan that we can take as many ideas as we can and put them in that basket and prepare ourselves for as many eventualities as we can think of.
Any other Ward 1 candidates want to jump in? No? Oh, yes?
I love your thinking. I just want to mention that a big thing for me is working on using our incredible citizen talent pool, and so this would be an example of one of the areas that I'd like to see us reaching out. When I go around knocking on doors, and the incredible people that I've met since moving to Port Hope keep offering this notion of they want to help make the town better, and this would be one of the areas where I think we would really benefit from putting the call out so that we can get people in. And I just want to point out that I'd also want to use contacts with educational institutions so that when we're developing some sort of a master plan, we know that it is from an evidence-based perspective rather than what is blowing on the wind for the day.
Anyone else? Okay. Peter, was your question answered?
Well, it hasn't been answered yet, but I'd like to put the new council-elect on notice that you have 3 months to plan for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Curtis?
I am Curtis Griebois from Ward 1. I wish you all luck. This is a tough one. It's been going on for years. Employment is, I think, the key to it. I can't really speak for retired people on that respect. The one person that I did want to ask is Jeff Leeds. He's been on council for 20 years. I would like to be on record that I would like him at some point to tell us what he's done for 20 years on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Was I supposed to give my name? I didn't. I just...
No, just step up to the mic, sir.
Yeah, thanks.
And if you wouldn't mind just directing your question first.
I will, yeah. I don't know if it's a question so much as a confirmation, and I think the first gentleman, Anthony, but from a lot of the candidates, I've heard references about developers maybe solving the problems of the housing crisis in Port Hope. It is a crisis from what I understand.
Could you move closer?
Yes, particularly the affordable crisis. I would like to say I've retired from just over 40 years in the construction industry with some very big corporations. I've not worked for developers for many, many years, but the one thing I can tell you, and I think many of you know this already, developers are not in business to do social housing unless they're making profits. And if anybody thinks that they can strong arm a developer to come into town and to say you've got to do this, it's not going to work. It's not worked anywhere in the country, it'll never work again. You know, please don't waste the taxpayers' money by pursuing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have more questions? Step right up.
May I respond to that?
Oh, yes, Les.
I think we have, I think we have some persuasion powers for developers, especially new developers coming to town. And we make this part of our agenda. If we can show them that they have a responsibility to affordable housing in our community, and it's not going to cost them anything except maybe a little bit of profit on the houses that they turn over to us, I think that's a viable solution worth exploring anyways.
Thank you. Tom.
Oh, Tom Lawson. Which one of you is responsible for streets and traffic? Is there anybody? Okay, well, I'll ask you then.
Okay.
What do you think of the sign on Highway 2 leading to Coburg about 100 yards outside Port Hope? And the sign says, "Welcome cyclists to Port Hope." What do you think of that sign?
Well, that's a pretty broad question. I'd like you to be a bit more specific, because, I mean, I'm not sure how this is geared toward homelessness. If you could put that together for me, that would help.
Well, I do consider the real problem of housing and income as central, but attached to that is the fact that I hardly ever see anybody bicycling around Port Hope. And yet Coburg is full of bike paths, and they're excellent bike paths all the way to Port Hope until you get within 100 yards of us. And what I'm
Thank you, Tom.
Hey?
Thank you. We'll give Terry a chance to respond.
Okay, Terry, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Actually, with respect to cycling is a big thing in rural Port Hope. And recently we've just done some road improvements, particularly on the 4th line, which is a major cycling area going up Sylvan Glen to 4th line. So I would just have to come back and say that there are a number of cyclists here, and the good thing about that, to bring that back into homes, etc., is that a number of those cyclists over the years have seen what they like and they move here, so that's an opportunity.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Excuse me.
I was about to, I didn't want to interrupt the question as it was being spoken, but I did want to respond to the previous question. Yeah.
Okay, remind us what the question was, please.
Well, I think that it wasn't so much as a question, so much as a statement, right? You're not going to be able to strong-arm developers, and you can't tell them what they're going to build. You can't give them the blueprints to, this is what you're going to do now. But one of the things, I think that we can do in council is, because we do have control over bylaws and we do have control over zoning. And so one of the opportunities we have is, because, one of the unfortunate things about where, living here, maybe it's unfortunate, maybe it's not, we become addicted to huge houses. People love big houses. And when we get into zoning and such, to zone for smaller homes, or at least be able to do duplexes, or be able to allow homes to be built with legal conforming basement apartments, that opens up the opportunity for someone to buy one of those, be able to offset their own mortgage, and also be able to help out with an apartment. So I think there's some opportunity there to be able to talk through.
Thank you.
I'd also like to respond to that question.
Oh. Okay.
Todd actually covered most of what I wanted to say, which is great. Thanks, Todd. I think if we can make a compelling case to developers to say, sure, build your 3,000 square foot home, but hey, put a loft over the garage that you can then sell as an income earning potential to the new owner. That can make a compelling case. I also wanted to touch on the cycling thing too, if I may. I think it's important to point out that part of thinking about affordable housing is we need to think about the transportation aspect of that, and making sure that we are, a bike-friendly community, that particularly affordable, if we're looking at larger multi-unit places, we need to make sure the bus gets there on a regular schedule. So that is certainly a consideration that we need to look at as part of an affordable housing strategy.
Thank you. Oh, just...
I want to address the same thing, just make a couple of clarifications. We do have some developments that have a legacy aspect to them. So with that legacy, we can't push the developer around too much, but we can work cooperatively with them to a common goal. 15-year-old plans still have the same right to go ahead, even though it's 15 years later. Where our strength lies is if we define, the provincial government has put some fairly strong components together that aren't passed yet, indicating that the legislation will require more intensification, so we will have to address them with bylaws. The best chance we have now are things like Mason homes and some of the homes that are going up, is to work with them to get incorporating other areas. Bottom line is they do need to make a profit, and I think the gentleman was absolutely right. And they need to be within a certain viability from a company perspective. So working with legacy is different than working forward. Working forward, I think we have a much stronger chance of incorporating anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry.
Thank you. We there? No. Not yet? We're there now? Good. One of the other things we have to do is, this is a very attitudinal thing. And we have to change the attitude up the ladder. And that means that we have to get both the provincial governments and the federal government involved in this process. If we think we can do this on our own, let's not fool ourselves. We cannot. And therefore, we need an incredibly strong voice within the municipality and other municipalities to lobby these governments to do the things that we need them to do. Because if we don't do that, it's just simply not going to happen.
Thank you. Now, did I see a hand? Was that Tony?
Yes, thank you. I just want to underline the comment that was made related to transportation. The housing issue is, as was mentioned earlier, very much a function of income and jobs. And transportation is in many ways as limiting a problem as is lack of housing. If you live somewhere and you work somewhere, you need to get from this place to that place and back, and it's not always easy to do. If you have a part-time night shift job in Coburg and you live in Port Hope, it'd be very difficult to get there.
Thank you. Okay, is that everyone? But you'll have to wave at me a little more or something. Okay, yes, Wade.
I forgot what I was going to say. Vicki Mink had some interesting ideas, I thought, as to how you can build affordable housing and make it sustainable at the same time. And I'm wondering, given your background, whether you have any ideas as to how Port Hope might be able to have a demonstration development, perhaps, of that sort of sustainability for low-cost housing. Whether there's something that we could do here. Is there money available for that sort of thing? Do you know of any other examples anywhere for that?
Yeah, well, I do know that there are buildings in our community that are privately owned. There's one I believe called Headwaters that's actually in near Camborne. There's other businesses around as well. There's in Prince Edward County, there's a cheese factory, for instance. So we see private residences as well as businesses that are incorporating this type of architecture into their design. So building a social housing unit of some sort to inspire an architect that is actually going to bid on working on this building. It could be something that we could put pressure on to say that this is what we want going forward in our community and be an example to other communities that we're going to use sustainable practices in as many buildings as we possibly can, and then have others look towards our community as an example.
Anyone else in Ward 2? Thank you. Was your question answered, Wade?
Yes.
Well, of course, this is an endless conversation.
Thank you.
If I may.
Well, we were trying to keep the responses. We'll see how we're going. At 8 o'clock, if we don't have more questions coming up, then maybe we'll loosen things a little. How's that? Okay.
Sorry, I'm really short. I guess this would be to Ward 1 and our mayor as well. I've lived downtown for 12 years, and I'll tell you, rent control is a godsend, so that's pretty good. Is there anything that we could be doing with property owners downtown, whether it be with the empty storefronts, or their rent, or their taxes, that would give an incentive to not only bring businesses in downtown, which might in tandem lower the rent in other apartments downtown, and work together and try to figure out a happy medium? I'm new to the whole thing, so I'm just a little bit curious as to what everybody thinks.
I'll lead off with that for sure. We have got the community improvement plan, I mentioned it. The details in there are for economic development. We have a significant amount of money available and how it can be used. So there's no question in my mind that if we want to refurbish the downtown a little bit, the second and third floors of many of the buildings are not habitable because they don't meet code and they're not safe. I think we can work with the owners to give financial incentives. There could be grants and there can also be low interest loans, and we've talked about those. We do need to put that together strategically and working with the HBIA and also with the heritage group that we have in the ACO. If we can all work together, the goal would be to have all those second and third floor accommodations full but safe. And I think with the contribution, the rents should be affordable. That would be part of the program.
Now, to whom did you direct the question?
I guess Ward 1.
All Ward 1?
Ward 1, I guess.
Oh,
Like
yes. Les? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'm not going to go over into the ground that Bob's already gone over, but we were fortunate in that we are a community that has access to our Port Hope Area Initiative or long-term waste funds. We have two parts of it. In the urban area, we have $10 million to make interest on it. We've approached the Federal Development Corporation to help us administer some of those interest-bearing funds, the interest on those funds, to set up almost like a venture capital fund that people coming into town that couldn't probably get loans from the banks, etc., we could provide them loans to help them repayable loans. I'd go into it in a little more detail, but my time is red.
Yes. Thank you, Les. Will has his hand up.
Sorry. Okay, so something that Port Hope is already working on is a sort of a disincentive to exactly what you're talking about, where an owner of a property gets a 30% rebate because the property is vacant. They get a rebate on their taxes or a discount in their taxes. So that's a disincentive to making these units habitable. I liked very much what Bob said about the municipality helping the owners develop these into places that are safe and up to code. But getting rid of the 30% is going to take time. I believe the province is involved and so on. A lot of municipalities are trying to change that. What I would suggest is in the interim, we put in some sort of an incentive, maybe a 10 or 15% tax rebate for people that take a vacant building and turn it into affordable housing. And I'm sorry, Les, if that makes you apoplectic, because I know you're the finance guy, but I think there's an opportunity there.
Thank you, Will. Bob, if you just don't mind, I'll let Terry speak and then I'll let you speak again. Thank you.
Are we on again? Almost. Were you there? Good. Thank you. It's always nice. Well, with respect to the 30%, well, I think that's been removed. I don't think that's any longer available. So that incentive has been taken away. But going back to what you were talking about, again, it goes back to a plan, a master plan of some kind. I think it's important to take a look at what we've got in our downtown core and really involve all of the people at one time and see if we can put together. Because if we cherry pick one person to another, it's going to be extremely difficult to get anything really accomplished. We do have the community improvement plan in place. We have lots of opportunities. The question is, are we putting all the people in the same room at the right time to discuss the right things?
Thank you. Bob?
I just want to verify, it's taken a little over 2 years, and we focused on the 30% rebate vacancy, and it has been removed. We petitioned both the federal government, we had community support, but we also had county support. So it's a done deal. Some people, particularly those who had the vacancies, didn't like it. But now you're seeing, as an example, some of the vacant properties that we had are now being sold and picked up for their Canadian Tire, the barber shop. It's a significant impact to make sure that people do not leave things vacant over time. We've got the file factory working hard on that now too, see if we can get that up and running. But without question, that is gone. It's a done deal. Okay.
Thank you. Was your question answered?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
My name is Tony Renfro from Ward 1. Something has occurred to me while I was listening to all the responses. I'd like to throw something into the box, into the big box, but what I say, you would have to pick and choose things from the box to see how it might apply.
So to whom are you throwing?
Well, I'll say I'm looking for the most senior people who might have historical perspective, political and historical perspective. And I want to say this has got nothing to do with policy. But about 60 years ago, after the war, a lot of men came home from the war to Britain. And in Britain, all over the landscape, there were built council houses. They built them huge swaths of subdivisions. They were called estates. And they were owned by the council, and they were built by the council. So, Ed, they could build the small basements that you would...
Tony! That's your time.
Okay, well so what I'm saying is there's the concept of the council house. Build the council houses, and all you have to do is get the money.
Okay, then who's going to go first? Les.
Your last statement was the one you should have got out first. All we need is money. And where we get the money, we've got to lobby the feds, the province, and the county. They're the keepers of the money. And then we can start advancing ideas, whether it's your idea, whether it's my idea, whether it's a community idea.
I'm not proposing it's an idea, but a concept. So just figure out how to get the money.
We'll get the money.
Thank you, Les. Bob?
This is an interesting concept. If you look at the strategic plan, you look at the priorities that a community sets, there's a lot of words. The reality, if you want to look at your budget, that's where your priorities are. So if we're making housing and affordable housing a priority, we do need to put a conscientious budget figure behind it, because there's only one taxpayer, right? And it doesn't matter where it comes from. There's a finite amount of money available and it's priorities. So I think that the priority, and we're hearing loud and clear, at least in the top three, needs to be some of our social service. We can't expand our businesses and our industries and all the things that we need to do. And I think, Rhonda, you've mentioned it. We don't have any employment here. We don't have people coming to work. One of the first things we did was get the GO, coming out here a little bit. That's so people can get here and get out of here as well, at a reasonable cost. We need employment, and these people need jobs.
Thank you, Bob. Terry?
This is getting interesting. But I think it comes back to the fact that, again, it comes back to long-term planning. We're not going to be able to do this right away. I think it's important to say one clear thing here today. There's been a lot of really good information, there's a lot of good attitude, there's a lot of good feelings about what we should do. But I think the reality check that we need is, this is not something that we can do overnight. If you expect the next council to get this underway strongly within a year, that's probably not going to happen. But what has to happen is the plan has to begin. If we don't get that plan underway now, we're never going to see it happen. So there's a sense of urgency of getting this started. But we have to be realistic that it's not something we're going to achieve overnight.
Anyone else? Tony, was your question answered?
Yes.
Thank you. Frank?
Yeah, I'll direct this to, Vicky, because of your architectural experience, Todd, because you talked a little bit about tiny homes, Bob, because you really know what's happening, I think, at the, especially at the municipal and provincial level in regards to the Ontario Municipal Board, OMB. That's still on the guidelines we use for our bylaws.
It's changed, just so you know.
It's changed a lot. Therefore, how do we get our bylaws? That's number one. Is we talk a lot about bylaws here in planning. Where are we going with this? And is this the way to get affordable housing with tiny homes and the like?
Starting with Vicky?
I asked Vicky because of her architectural experience, yes.
Well, I think that's what we need to do. We need to put pressure on changing these bylaws so that we can have mixed dwellings. We can incorporate larger structures as well as smaller structures. Expect a certain percentage of these developments to be smaller dwellings, and set that requirement. That's really up to us to put that pressure on. That's what we want for our community.
Thank you. Todd?
Yeah, I agree. You're certainly dealing with a bylaw issue, and when we look at communities that are doing pilot projects on things like tiny homes and so on, that was one of the things that they had to switch first, was we had to be able to change where do these homes go. Some of them are looking at things like alleyways and areas and where can you put these little homes and be able to take people off the street and put them into it. And in order to do that, you do have to take a look at the plan and bylaws, and you're able to switch that up.
Thank you. Bob?
Along the same lines, council, governs the bylaws. We can bring them forward and pass them. It's that simple. Where we need to do is to make sure we work with the planning and the fire and all those kind of things. We're dealing with archaic bylaws. They're 20, 30, 40 years old, and times have changed. I talked to somebody today who could probably put 4 units, and they're only going to be able to put 2. Parking, it's a requirement. Let's change it. Let's have a look at it. So we can make some of those changes very quickly. We don't have to wait, years and years, but we definitely have to take lessons from other communities. Other communities are ahead of us, and we can move faster on this than I think most people would think.
Anyone else? Les?
Sorry, I don't mean to dominate the mic, but Christina, Dave, Louise Bletcher, Habitat for Humanity, myself and a few others sat on a working group on affordable housing. And one of the things we came up with is, let's get a shipping container. Let's put it on the site of the Habitat for Humanity in Coburg, just a raw shipping container. Let's bring in the trades on a volunteer basis to cut the windows out and to make it into a small house. And then at the end of the project, which would be done in real time and people could see it, then we would either put the house on a lot in Port Hope or auction it off for somebody to use as a cottage. So that's the type of thinking that we were at, and we think it's a valuable thing.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. Frank, was your question answered?
I think for the most part.
Thank you.
Carol Payne from Ward 1. I want to say the word 1 because it's a word 2 thing that I want to say. I think, Vicki, that your ideas about many things are very interesting. I think if you think about changing the designation of the 50-acre farm to put more houses than one on it, you have to do it in a way that still protects the farmland. Because in other places, that's where the developers get in there, and suddenly there's a thing. The other thing that I wanted to say is that we started the conversation amongst all of you by expressing real concern about the need to do something about housing, and then we pulled back quite a way from what I hear in the audience. That I don't hear the urgency. If you don't have a home, you don't have anything. You can't have stuff, and you can't have a place.
Thank you, Carol.
That's just a thing to think about.
Questions?
This is purely an observation that I've taken since the meeting started on this topic. There were two buzzwords. One was transportation, the other one was employment. If I was a developer, I'm not coming to town if the people can't pay for what I'm building. Nobody up here outside of Bob has talked about employment. I mean, if we bring employment, if we get some type, I mean, I know it's a fish out of water, but if employment is the key here, what are you going to build? You talk about building downtown and all this kind of stuff. I think and transportation was the other big one. You can't bring people to town and send them into Ward 2 and expect them to get into McDonald's. You can't do it right. Prove me wrong. It's just an observation.
Thank you.
Could I respond to that?
Oh, we got some hands up here. So you found a question in there, did you?
Well, sure.
Let's hear it.
Curtis, I see where you're going with that on the employment, and I actually think it is the reverse. Because I think we need the housing first. So let's take, for example, we got the new industrial parkway. They put a hotel up there. The hotels are typically going to look for unskilled, minimum wage kind of jobs. That's how they typically fill them. You can't have those if those people don't live here, right? It's hard enough to get them. So I think you need to get the housing in place first, get the people here. The jobs are here. You know, we hear it all the time that, you know, people are starved trying to find a workforce. So whether it's cart and a horse or not, but I really think that the gateway to all this is going to be the affordable housing.
Sam?
Really don't need. Thank you. I absolutely semi-agree with you. Affordable housing has to go in tandem with other things. Employment, transportation, social services. We just can't say, by golly, we're going to build half a dozen homes here and we'll get folks in them. Well, we got folks in them, now they got to do something. So whatever we do, it's a community thing. It's not affordable housing, it's an affordable community that we grow this thing. And we just don't grow the house. We grow the community, we grow the employment, we grow the transportation. And we talk to each other and we know exactly what we're doing.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Todd, I'm going to let Laurie join in here, and then I'll go to you.
As a local employer in Port Hope, I find that we're desperate for employees. And I know we have spoken about that this morning. We were at an Economic Development 101 series, and it was quite evident there that this is something that's a real issue with our business owners in the community. So I think finding affordable housing to be able to allow people to live here so that they can work in the jobs that are here and available would be very critical.
Todd? Thank you, Lori.
And, you know, Sam, I semi-agree with you. Well, I think from the point is, you know, I said at the beginning, on the onset of this, is that this is going to be a keystone issue. And the reason why that is, you know, we just filled an industrial parkway, right? The clock's ticking as of today. Sometime between today and the day that those folks start their career fairs, if we can't get the employment base in, then we're going to have troubles. And that employment base is going to go with housing. We have to start getting the housing done now. This is a very important issue right now.
Thank you. Bob?
It does have to be a priority, and I just want to give you a couple of statistics. $48,000, you know, earning power is considered, you know, minimal or pauper. Out of that, and people should not be spending more than 30%. That should be the maximum on shelter. And in Northumberland County, 6,000 households are spending over 30%. 50% of them are paying more than they can possibly afford. 37% are actually paying more than 50%. So housing is a crisis. And even for people with incomes well over that, up to like $85,000, cannot find affordable housing. We need to solve it. It needs to be a priority, and we need to put our money where our mouth is.
Thank you. Anyone else? Terry?
You got a nod. Good. Thank you very much. I'm going to actually add to Bob's comment, because that's what I was going to say, and that is the fact that right now we have so many people, even if they can afford it, have nowhere to go. We need 200 or 300 virtual units. So I think what we have to do is we have to take a look at housing, rental housing, driving rental housing, in terms of getting interest. It seems that if you get something started, it seems to generate more and more and more from there. So that if we can, whether it's affordable housing or slightly above affordable housing, we need to get on the ball to try and get any kind of housing in here so that, quote, affordable housing can be a part of the picture and not the total focus, which may make it more difficult.
Anyone else? Oh, John.
Jobs seem to be quite a topic of the night too. Most people maybe aren't aware that Ward 2 has approximately 3,900 acres of commercial industrial land city. I think as a council, we need to work harder at possibly filling some of that land with sustainable jobs, good employment that will be well-paying jobs, which will encourage more people to the area, to the community, which will put a bigger workforce in place for rural and urban to look at the same time. And in the end, will help with the housing problem. And we get more people here working, more people coming to live, things will progress as the population progresses along too.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Okay. Another question? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Trish Dryden, Ward 1. I'd like to thank you, first off, for your thoughtful answers, and secondly, to come back to the initial question that I don't think was answered, which is we have a homeless crisis as well. We are 3 months from winter. What are you going to do? And I'd like Ward 1 to answer this, please. Councillors and mayors.
Thank you for your question. Let's begin, Tony, with you. Well, I'm assuming you're all going to say something. Maybe that's not a fair assumption.
That was definitely not a fair assumption. Other than to recognize the urgency of the problem. Winter is coming, and even if it's a mild winter, it's still winter. And we really do need to get on our toes on this one.
Thank you.
I
Now,
know
just a moment, Wendy. I think Ian, no, I'm sorry, Miles has the microphone. I think we're coming down the table.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
So I guess principally one of the things that we need to do is start meeting with the people that provide the services to these individuals in need and find out specifically what we need to be implementing. So I'm kind of at a lack of information as to specifically what it is that we need to do to provide them with the care that they need. Though I have been meeting with some of the individuals that run some of these organizations, we need to start doing that a little bit more. They hopefully will be able to guide us as to, whether we're in the point of like emergency service provision, that sort of thing.
Thanks. Great question, right? And I think the truth of the matter is, and if we were just to cut to the chase, obviously we need to get these people someplace warm, someplace dry, and someplace safe. So starting at that point, the next question then becomes where. Spitballing, since the question came up, is we just bought Lakeland Place. Is that an opportunity? Is that an opportunity to get changed over quickly enough so that we can get these people in? On top of the services, we need to speak to those people. We need to get to those people and get them off the streets, off the beaches, and we need to make sure that they're comfortable going into places. Truth of the matter is, not all of them are.
Okay, I know I suggested that Lakeland Place was an alternative, but it certainly is an alternative 3 months out. We don't even have the building yet. We have no idea what the insides are like, the infrastructure, the heating or anything, so that's off the table, to answer your question directly. What is on the table that we could do immediately is we could take over the town park area, designate it as an emergency site, and have the things in place such as how do we get the people there, transportation-wise, who's going to feed them once they're there, so we're going to need volunteers to do the cooking. We have the facility. It's going to take the community to rally around this, but we could designate it as an emergency site. And that would fit the time frame.
There are available areas in town as a result of the cleanup. There are some places that have been left vacant because of that, and there are opportunities there to allow people to be housed in there. However, there would have to be bylaw changes because many of the areas are not considered residential.
Well, I think if this is going to be a priority for the next council, and it should be, I'll circle back again to talking to the groups that are already out there with boots on the ground and know this issue and know what the answers are. We need to consult them. We need to see what they think are the right ideas. One idea I heard that sounded very good was designating town park as an emergency place, if that is the proper thing, and these groups that work with the community can tell us that. Another thing that I heard that I will echo is you're going to run into people who do not want to come in out of the cold and off the streets. And we need to find a sensitive way to do that. Earlier in tonight's conversation, I heard that we need to make use of the police to do that. I'm here to tell you, I think that's a mistake. As an emergency responder, when the police enter the situation, it usually goes south. We need to approach them through Greenwood Coalition or through somebody else that they already know and feel comfortable with.
Thank you. I would ask, respectfully, Patricia, when I was coming to this and reading madly through my computer, and one of the thoughts that came up was, especially with the topic that's on the floor now, do the Greenwood Coalitions and the United Ways and the Salvation Nation armies, do they communicate with each other?
Yes. Through the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee, which you have a list of member agencies in the package you were given tonight. So yes, we meet round the table once a month.
Oh, that's good. I didn't know. Thank you.
Plus other affiliations.
You only get 30 seconds.
Take that one. I agree with so much that's been said, of course, but I do think the respective groups that are all involved with the Affordable Housing Committee should be making presentations to council with recommendations to direct us on what needs there are and what we can supply. I also agree with the Town Park Rec Center as an emergency center, and it is obviously an emergency, but this has to be something with some longevity to it. It's going to be a long winter. It can't just be for an overnight or a weekend. Maybe the Jack Burger Sports Complex, and there's showers so people can have hygiene and good care for themselves, and as you say, people to feed them. Definitely an issue, definitely something that has to be done. I agree, Trish, and thank you for asking.
Just something that...
Go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
You already started. We have a number of issues that have been brought up here. One of the things that we're lacking, not only in Ward 1, but in Ward 2 as well, is that we need to get together and start creating inventories of available units. Plus, there are many vacant land, much vacant land that is not being properly used. And I use as an example the old hotel up and off the 401 at Toronto Road. We need to do these inventories to get to know what we do have and what we need.
Thank you. Ian?
I don't have much to add to what everybody else said, because they're all really smart people. I think looking at Town Park, Jack Burger, those are all great options. But I think the most important thing, in addition to talking to the groups that know these issues better than we do, is to talk to the actual people who are suffering at the moment. Because we don't know, we don't know what their problems are. Greenwood, Habitat, they would have better ideas. But David was actually telling me last week when I spoke to him about a research project that they've undertaken where they actually went and spoke with people who were experiencing these issues to understand how they got there, how they got out of it, and what needs to be done to help them. And I think that's how we as a potential council are going to learn the best solutions, is to go and talk to the people who are actually experiencing the issue.
Come back to Bob. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We do have emergency services awareness, and we've had both cooling stations and warming stations. They're not ideal, but they do meet the emergency requirements at the time. And they're usually driven by the fire and the police. So as the police are well aware, they're a good force, and they are very sensitive to the people who are in need, and they do treat them well. So the police building has received some of these people. We did open Town Hall for cooling as well. But I think Laurie mentioned it. There's more needed because people need hygiene, they need showers, and that sort of thing isn't readily available, even at the agricultural park. So the Jack Burger complex probably has some potential. It needs to be an emergency response, which we have, but then it needs to be longer term. It needs to join with these other organizations and the county. But in the end, it's going to cost money, because you can't have people up there without supervision and being looked after. And that's our opportunity to get them in the system. And we have a few examples that Cobra's doing a bit as well. So emergency response, absolutely.
Vicki? And then Terry?
I just want to address this to Ward 1, but what a lot of people may not recognize is in Ward 2, there's a lot of people who are living in old cottages, trailers, sheds, buildings that are not up to code and are not suitable for winter conditions. So when I speak about changing bylaws to allow multi-unit dwellings in the rural ward, it's not so much about severing property, but it's allowing people to build a secondary unit within their home over a garage or a basement apartment or even a cabin, where we can actually regulate what is being built and make sure that they are to code and that people are living in structures that are suitable for it rather than hiding out.
Thank you, Vicki. Terry?
Just one quick addition to that is, and yes, we do have places where we can assist people overnight. My big question is what happens in the morning. I mean, if we have a cold spell, it doesn't last one day. It lasts a good month. And so, I mean, it's a little bit of a Band-Aid. A Band-Aid is better than nothing. But I really think we have to consider what happens in the morning.
John?
I haven't heard anybody mention that maybe as a council we should go out and talk to these homeless people to find out what their actual needs are. Some people don't want shelters. Some people enjoy being out, living on the land, so to speak. You can't force those people inside, but I'm sure there's lots of them that have good ideas on ways to help them through the bad weather, heat or cold. People talk about Ruth Clark or the Jack Burger or the town park, but what about the Ruth Clark Center? We've got the people downtown in the downtown core who are homeless. They need a place for a warm meal as well as a warm bed. We could look at places in the downtown core more than away from the downtown core to help these people out.
Thank you. From the audience, Ed.
Okay, I came tonight to try and get an idea of where everybody stood on voting and on trying to get an idea what's going on. I'd like to address the question of where do you find or where do you see 25 years from now affordable housing, that kind of thing. And if I might address it to Vicki, Ian, Todd, and Miles to see what their vision on what's going to happen.
Well, one of the, I would say, pillars that I would intend to bring into all of my decision-making if I were elected to council is sustainability. And what I define that is as making decisions for today that will enhance and not compromise the future. And I think that in the past we have made a lot of decisions for today, and we haven't thought about the future. And I think we can incorporate that into housing, into jobs, into the way we structure our roads. Everything we do, we can be looking towards the future and making it sustainable. The climate is changing. We know that. We need to start thinking about those things and not just building for today.
Thank you, Vicki. So, Ian?
I think that's actually a really valid point, and that we need to be looking at how are these things going to last for 10, 25, 50 years. We've just been talking about sort of the near-term solution. What are the long-term solutions? Again, I think coming back to the municipality being a facilitator of all of these other groups that are doing great work, and making sure that we are providing as much support, whether that's feet on the ground, money, to get those things done, to make sure that everybody has a home to go to. If that means the town taking the ownership and saying, we're going to buy St. Mary's down there in Pine and Walden and turn it into affordable housing, I think we should do that. Because we need those units, we need those people. And our town is nothing without our people. So making sure that they have a place to live, they have a job to go to, they have a way to get there, those really are the most important things we need to be looking at.
Thank you, Ian. Todd?
Thanks, Ed. 25 years is hard to look at, but totally get where you're coming from, right? Vicki, I think you said it beautifully, right? We have to stop looking at today and start looking towards the future. And the truth of the matter is, the ship sailed on today, right? What we need to be doing is foundational stuff that is going to be able to allow the next generation to live well and work well, and that means getting our infrastructure in place, that means getting our housing in place, that means getting our jobs in place, that means getting our transportation in place. We need to be making those steps today. It takes a long time to get to where that is, and if we don't start today and start looking towards that future, we'll never get there.
Thank you, Todd. Miles?
I love the question. Yeah, so I mentioned before using contact with educational facilities, and this is one of the things that I would say is a place that we can really benefit. So yes to sustainability, and yes to cutting edge technology that is used in house building and community development. Communities are built from community planning that also incorporates how houses are brought into the mix, how we can keep people here and working. And so I would want to reach out to, again, educational institutions that are nearby. I would speak to UOIT's engineering program, for example, to bring in, we talked about kind of like a demonstration community. Can we have some of the students there work on capstone projects, they're called, so that they can show off different new techniques in engineering. I would want to see social sciences involved as well on this community development front. How can we get all these new ideas to be featured in Port Hope? Did I cut out there? Featured in Port Hope so that we are a community of the future that is looking forward.
Thank you, Miles. Okay, anyone else? Bob? We're going to wrap up shortly, so here's your
I
chance.
totally agree with you. I'd just like to extend it a little further to 50 years. And you know, the journey's good, but if you don't know where you're going and what you end up with, you can't get there. So I think we need to have, and you've got a real good opportunity here to bring some new, vibrant, counselors, to the table. 25 years is not going to bother me. I won't be here. So I'm not the one actually to be planning it, but I think we should set the goal. We should have a 50-year plan, a 25-year plan, or at least a goal, and then we make a plan to the goal. Having a plan without the goal is not going to get us anywhere.
Anyone else? Oh, Les.
One last thing, okay. So this is a radical idea. We have, in the urban area, we have a $10 million fund that we're not allowed to spend the principal on. I think we should go after this dispensation to free up that money. And maybe, if it's the will of the people, let's start building houses ourselves.
Bob, you have a response?
I do. Don't touch the $10 million because once it's gone, it's gone. But use every penny it earns and make it maximize the investment. Use the investment. That's where we got the CIP money, the Community Improvement Plan. And absolutely, we need to invest. I've said it from the start. If we don't put our money where our mouth is, we're not going anywhere. So look at our budget. This has to be a priority. Housing has to be a priority because it starts to go into all the other areas we talked about in employment. How many people, young people on the street and in the employment area, like 50, are earning $48,000 a year, and that's minimum. They can't afford to live. So set those goals, right? And let's not touch grandma's dowry, but let's expand it and use the money because once it's gone, it's gone. And $10 million, believe it or not, does not go very far. You can finance a lot.
Anyone else? Ed, was your question answered?
It was.
Very good, thank you. So I would like to thank you all for being here.
It's worth fixing it.
And I would like to thank Pastor Jeff Knott and Grace Church for allowing us to speak. And I believe the candidates will be sticking around. We are going to be here another 15 minutes, so you'll have a chance to chat with them, ask some one-on-ones, by all means, and maybe grab a coffee.